Oh, can you hear me? Welcome to the big show tonight. We are on, as always, at 5 o'clock. We've got plenty to get to, plenty of things we've got to talk about, lots to get to when it comes to the Super Bowl. Obviously, last night the Eagles basically went out and just basically destroyed the Chiefs. And as a result of destroying the Chiefs, they were able to basically cast some doubt on whether or not the Chiefs are an actual dynasty and what that means for Patrick Mahomes. And I'll tell you, I would just tell you this much right now: not much. Doesn't mean a whole lot, really, if you ask me, because they still have a lot of time and a lot of years ahead of them. And so I feel like, there's still 4 or 5 more year window for the Chiefs to win. They could come back and win it again next year. They could win 2 in a row. I expect Patrick Mahomes to finish his career with like 4 or 5 Super Bowls. Now, here's the thing I will tell you. If there's a lesson to be learned for the Steelers from this, I would say it's this. The lesson is, you don't need an elite quarterback, period. I would say that what you've seen from the Eagles twice now in the last, 8 years or 9 years, is you can win a Super Bowl and you can do so without an elite quarterback. I think Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback. I'm not saying he's a terrible quarterback. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm not even saying he's average. He's good, but he's not elite. And because he's not elite, you know what? The Eagles have proven that you can actually win. You can actually win if you've got a quarterback who fits the system right, and you've got an incredible supporting cast around him. And the Eagles' defense basically won that game. And guess what? The Eagles' defense, in my mind, is probably, the Eagles' defense is what the Steelers' defense is trying to do, or what they've wanted to do, or what they've tried to do over the last 5 years, and that is be a defense that's good enough to win a game when the offense isn't playing really well. Because the Eagles had a number of games this year where the offense was sputtering a little bit, and guess what? They just basically, when you look at it, their defense really carried the day, and they carried the day last night, really. Saquon Barkley, the Chiefs did everything in their power to sell out to stop Saquon Barkley, and the Eagles made enough plays to win. But again, when you get 14 points essentially from your defense, it becomes a little bit easier. And I think that's one of the things that the Steelers have been trying to do with their defense. They want their defense to be that defense that can go out and can win games in a way that they're able to turn the other team over. They're able to get the quarterback sacked. They're able to make high-impact plays. They're able to score points. That's what you learn from the Eagles' defense, if you ask me, is that's what the Steelers' defense is supposed to be, and they haven't been that. They haven't been that at all. And that's what I would say. So to me, you look at it from that standpoint, there's a lesson to be learned for the Steelers. And I disagree with this guy who says basically that he's trying to say Jalen Hurts is elite. He's not elite. I think he's a good quarterback. We use the word elite way too much. Is he a top 10, top 12 type quarterback? Yeah, probably. But he's not on the level of Burrow. He's not on the level of Josh Allen. He's not on the level of Lamar Jackson. He's not on the level of Patrick Mahomes. Those guys are what I would call elite. A quarterback that you can say this guy can actually carry us over the finish line if we need him to. And I just don't know that Jalen Hurts is that guy. He's a winner. He's a guy that can make a lot of plays for you, and he can do a lot of good things. But at the end of the day, I think when you look at it from that standpoint, I just don't know that he's an elite quarterback. And I think what you learn from the Eagles is it's more important, because not everybody has an elite quarterback. It's more important, far more important, in my mind, to build a good team around your quarterback. I mean, the last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they had Nick Foles playing quarterback. But if you have a great offensive line and you have a great defense and you've got great players around your quarterback and your quarterback is good, but maybe not great, but good, that makes all the difference in the world. But let's make no mistake about it. Yes, he won the MVP last night, but the MVP of last night's game was the 4 guys that got pressure up front without having to basically blitz. That's the thing to me that you can't argue with. They're the guys that made it happen. They are the guys that really were the biggest and most important part of the storyline last night. It's the guys that made it happen were the 4 guys up front. Chiefs had no answer for them. The Chiefs could not do a thing with them. The Chiefs couldn't stop them, and they couldn't block them. And that was what happened. They couldn't block them. They couldn't stop them, anything. They basically just said, we're going to run these 4 guys at you, and we're going to continue to run 4 guys at you. And if you can't stop them, we don't have to commit anybody else. Now you're going to try and throw it with 7 guys covering. And that's sort of the ideal in football, really, not just the NFL, anywhere. It's that ideal. But I think there's another lesson here when it comes to the Steelers learning from the Eagles. And this is one we've talked about a number of times, right? This is one we've talked about a number of times, but it's true. If you have Andy Reid and he's there for 12 years or 13 years, and he continues to win at a certain level but never really wins and never really gets the team to the next level, when it's clear that his message is no longer becoming something that is important to the players, it's time to move on. Period. It's time to move on. And you can't worry about, boo-hoo. What if he leaves? Someone else is going to hire him in 10 minutes. Boo-hoo. Well, that doesn't matter. And what the Eagles said was, okay, he's a good coach. Someone else is going to hire him, but we need to go in a different direction. Then they hired Doug Peterson. And when they hired Doug Peterson, right, they basically said, when they hired Doug Peterson, that, hey, let's give him the offense. Let's give him the ability to try and see what he can do. He went out and won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles as his quarterback. And then 2 years later, they fired him. And then they hired basically another guy. They went out and hired Sirianni, and this is 4 years for him. And guess what? This is his second Super Bowl and his first one that he's won in 4 years. So they've gone 2 coaches since Andy Reid, and guess what? They've been fine. Absolutely fine. It's this idea that somehow you can't move on from a good coach because there's nobody else out there that possibly could replace him. Again, I think they've made it very clear you can move on from a good coach, period. And I think that's really what it is. And so I just don't think that it's an important enough, or it's a big enough topic that's talked about enough. When we sit here and we talk about, Mike Tomlin, there are plenty of examples, yes, of guys who got fired and, they were good coaches and the team moved on and then all of a sudden the team wasn't able to win, But it's funny, the people that are the Mike Tomlin apologists all say, well, you know what, if you move on from Mike Tomlin, you know what's going to happen to you? You're going to turn into the Carolina Panthers. You're going to turn into the, Jets. Nobody ever says, well, look at the Eagles. Look at the Ravens, who fired Brian Billick and moved on and ended up with John Harbaugh. I mean, look at the Tampa Bay Bucks, who fired Mike Tomlin's mentor, Tony Dungy, moved on and won a Super Bowl with John Gruden. I mean, it can happen. It does happen all the time. And so I don't think that, the discussions about Mike Tomlin are really usually that much, are usually fair, or at least intellectually honest, because I just don't think they are. I think people basically want to have their narrative and go with it. But my thing is, the Steelers are a good organization. They prove they're a good organization, right, by the way they usually do business in a manner that keeps them afloat. They never go to, 3-14 or 5-12 or whatever. They never go there. The question is, are they stuck in a certain place, and is Mike Tomlin the guy to get them to the next spot? I just don't think that is. I just don't think it is. Here we go. We got one, right? This guy here says Mike Tomlin is not the problem. And he's claiming that the Rooneys won't pay their assistants, which is nonsense. When Mike Tomlin picked up the phone and needed a defensive assistant, or actually didn't need a defensive assistant, he was just trying to save somebody's career. You think Brian Flores came here cheap? You think Brian Flores, who had money coming from the Dolphins, you really think he came here cheap and worked for nothing? That's just not. I mean, that's not the case. And they had two coordinators on the payroll already. This idea that it's not Mike Tomlin's fault is silly. Mike Tomlin hires and fires. Mike Tomlin picks the players. Mike Tomlin and his philosophy are the reason why the Steelers are stuck where they're stuck. So, I mean, there's no other way to say that, and that's absolutely the truth. And I think that if you're trying to absolve him, to me, then you're just not being honest with yourself. You're just not being honest with yourself, period. And that's what it comes down to. Now, one of the questions we asked, and I think this is the ultimate in hindsight, but when you take a guy like Chase Claypool in the second round over Jalen Hurts, I mean, the Steelers really weren't in that much of the market yet for a quarterback, number one. Number two, you know what? A lot of teams passed on Jalen Hurts. Number three, I don't know that anybody out there really thought Jalen Hurts was good enough to be a great quarterback. That's all there is to it. It's one of those situations where, you know what, I feel like it's important to know that it's just going to be, there we go. Hey, can you acknowledge hiring from within method works? Really? It does? It does? Hiring from within brought us Randy Fichtner, Matt Canada. That worked. And I would even argue Keith Butler. That worked. What are we talking about here? Give me a break. No, and I don't necessarily know that I want Mike Tomlin gone, but something's got to change. And I'll tell you, organizationally, the philosophy of this organization needs to change, period. Period. You can't win the way you won in the 70s anymore. You can't. And I think one of the things that was really fun about, if you watch the Super Bowl, one of the things that's fun about the Eagles is the way that they play offense is a modern day version of running smash mouth football. It's not the 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It's not, let's just try and grind clock. It's not any of that stuff. It's just basically one of these situations where they try and make big plays with their passing game. They try and get big chunks of yards with their passing game. They try and do things in their running game, right, by using their quarterback run. I mean, to me, I don't think the Steelers missed by not getting Jalen Hurts because, I don't know that he was a guy that really anybody wanted. So it's just one of those things where, I probably had more of an issue with them picking Chase Claypool over J.K. Dobbins. Turned out J.K. Dobbins got hurt a lot. Chase Claypool was what he was, so, it's kind of a wash, although, J.K. Dobbins today is a better player than Chase Claypool. But that's the benefit of hindsight. I mean, that's really the benefit of hindsight. I think Troy Fautanu was a good pick. I think he'll be a tackle for the Steelers for a lot of years. I mean, kid has a pick six in the Super Bowl. God bless him. But I think the Steelers probably made a good decision when it comes to picking Troy Fautanu this year. So, I think that it's easy to say, well, it's just going to, let's look back and say, well, this guy you didn't pick, this guy you didn't. Now, there are some times when you can do that. I mean, I think a no-brainer of all no-brainers, right, was when the Browns took Kellen Winslow instead of Ben Roethlisberger. That's not hindsight being 2020. That's you need a quarterback. What are you doing? I'd even say a few years ago when they took Myles Garrett instead of Patrick Mahomes because they need a quarterback. They're the biggest thing with the Browns. But, very few times can you look at that and say, boy, they really, really absolutely made a mistake. Because most times that's hindsight. That's the benefit of hindsight. It just is going to be, a situation of where the benefit of hindsight, sometimes it works for like the fourth round or the third round or whatever. But when you're in the throes of it, I guarantee you very few people in Pittsburgh were saying, draft Jalen Hurts. He's the guy that we need to draft. I just don't believe that's the case. I think that, most people were okay with, again, I was one that wanted Dobbins. Some people were okay with Claypool. That's just part of it. The larger question, however, though, is can the Steelers draft well enough in the next couple of years to become the Eagles? And the thing about it is one of the guys that really legitimately helped build the Eagles is on the Steelers staff. I mean, you've got Andy Weidel on the Steelers staff. Guess what? He's a big part of building the Eagles. That's the big thing. So you have him on the staff. Why wouldn't you be able to unless you're not going to let him work his magic? And I think you've got to, really understand that he's got to be able to work his magic. He's got to be able to do what he does and does well. He's got to be able to look at, and evaluate offensive linemen for whatever, or figure out how to make this defense better. But again, I'm telling you, I think one of the biggest issues is simple, and that is the philosophy, the schemes, the thought process of this coaching staff. And that's why I say it's Tomlin. I don't want to hear about coordinators at this point. He's had how many coordinators? Again, I keep saying this, and I don't know how many different ways I can say it. I'll say it one more time because it doesn't seem to get through. They've changed coordinators on both sides of the ball multiple times. They've changed the general manager. They've changed quarterbacks. They've gone through a whole reloading of the defense. They've gone through a whole reloading of the offense. They've done everything you can possibly do. There's one change they have not yet made. It's the one constant through this 8 years of no playoff wins. It's the one constant, and that's Mike Tomlin. You cannot absolve him for what's going on here. And that's my thing when we look ahead to Justin Fields. Okay, if you want to sign Justin Fields, that's great, but you got to let him be Justin Fields. You've got to open up your offense in a way that you let him do the things that he's capable of doing. It can't be, well, we're going to try like they did the first 6 games of this year. We're going to just try and have him not make mistakes and hope our defense is good enough to win games. You can't win in the NFL that way. You just can't. People that are talking about, well, look, the Eagles' defense won championships, but guess what? They have a really good offense as well. And their offense is creative. Their running game was creative. They're able to make explosive plays. They let Jalen Hurts, who, by the way, is a $250 million guy, they let him do a lot of quarterback run and a lot of things that you say, well, we can't do that because what if he gets hurt? The bottom line is their philosophy is he's good at these things. Let's let him do these things. And in doing that, you make the passing game a lot simpler. Now, admittedly, having A.J. Brown and the receivers they've got, yeah, that helps. But here's the thing. All of that comes down to the drafting and the development of players. And I think that when you take it that direction, if they have Andy Weidel in place and Omar Khan does his thing, and Mike Tomlin, he apparently really does know evaluating talent, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to draft people. And I go back to my original point. You look at Jalen Hurts, nobody would call him an elite quarterback. I'm sorry, he's just not. But what the Eagles were an elite team with a good quarterback. Period. Now, here's what's going to happen. And this, Brian brings up a really good point here. And I was just going to get to this. If you remember, after 4 years, Mike Tomlin had a Super Bowl championship, and he lost in a Super Bowl. And I think his record in playoff games was 5-2. I think he lost to Jacksonville and he lost to Green Bay, but he was 5-2 with 2 AFC titles in his first 4 years. Very similar to what Sirianni's done. This person asks, will they be happy if he goes the next 15 years now, or 14 or 15 years, and only wins 3 playoff games? And the answer is no. I can guarantee you this. If Nick Sirianni does not win a playoff game for the next 4 or 5 years, he'll be gone. Because that's how they do things. That's how the Eagles do things. And that's why the Eagles have won 2 of the last 8 Super Bowls and been to a third. Am I saying that I have a lot of people that want to tell me, oh, well, look at the Eagles, over the course of time, they were horrible. The Steelers have all these Super Bowls and the Eagles, listen, it's ancient history. Since 2000 or whatever year it was in 99, 2000, whatever year it was that Jeffrey Lurie took over the Eagles, they've been as good pretty much as anybody, except for the Patriots maybe. And, because the reality is of the way they do things. I mean, they've been to, I think, what is it now, 9, 10 conference championship games. They've been to 4 Super Bowls. They've won 2 of them. But their feeling is, guess what? If we don't get it done after 3 or 4 years, you're gone. Go coach Jacksonville. I mean, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl and was fired 2 years later. That's how organizations work. And guess what? They got rid of him after winning a Super Bowl. They've been to 2 since. It's just the way it is. And, I know there are Mike Tomlin apologists out there that don't want to hear that. But that's how organizations work. And the other thing that organizations do, they understand that you need to have a good defense. But if you're not aggressively on offense, if you're not aggressively pursuing points on offense, you ain't doing it right. Period. And that's the thing that you learn from the Super Bowl. As I watched the Super Bowl yesterday, I said those 3 things. Number 1, Eagles were bold in how they handled their coaches because they want to win. Number 2, Eagles defense is everything the Steelers defense claims they are, and they ain't. The Eagles defense went out there and scored points. The Eagles defense went out there and knocked the quarterback around. The Eagles defense won the game yesterday. And the other part of it is the Eagles also put a lot of resources into their offense. They went out and got Saquon Barkley, and everyone said, oh, why are you going to go pay for a running back? The answer was obvious, because he's not just a running back. He's not just a guy who's a running back. He's a guy that is a very, very, very important player. Period. He's a very important player. He's a player that basically he's a guy that can play out of the backfield. He's a guy that puts incredible pressure on defenses. Incredible pressure on defenses. And so I think that, it was worth it for them to go sign him. It was worth it for them to put the money into Jalen Hurts. It was worth it for them to go get A.J. Brown. It was worth it. You've got to build your offense as much as your defense. But again, it all starts with a philosophy. It all starts with a philosophy. And the philosophy of Mike Tomlin is stuck and rooted in a time and place long ago. By the way, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday. Home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's and tell Archie you said hello when you get there. I think the other lesson that we learned yesterday is that if you can't protect your quarterback, I don't care how good he is, it's going to be hard to win. Maybe you can beat bad teams, but when you play against a team that's got a good defensive front seven, it's hard to win if you can't protect your guy. And I think that that's another part of the Steelers, why it's so important for them to figure out the offensive line. Again, it looks like Mason McCormick is good. It looks like Zach Frazier is good. I think the Fautanu kid is going to be good. It all comes down to that other tackle spot for me. And I just feel like it is going to be important when we talk about all of these things that if they don't get this offensive line together and they don't understand that they have to play a different style of football than really they want to play, it's going to be a long, long stretch of not winning playoff games, period. The worst thing that could possibly happen is that the Rooneys and Mike Tomlin say, well, you see, the Eagles proved you can run the football and play defense and win a Super Bowl. If they think that, then they're missing the entire discussion. They're missing by a mile, because that's not what they should take out of the Super Bowl. They should take out of the Super Bowl the fact that, A, this defense that they're paying $400 zillion for isn't good enough. They should also take out of the equation that their offensive line that they've put a bunch of resources into, it's not good enough. I mean, I think Justin Fields would be fine if you put together, a team around him and played an offense that really, really took advantage of what he does well, but I just don't see that happening. That's why this offseason, and again, there's things swirling about Aaron Rodgers and, Matthew Stafford, every other geezer that you can find out there that, is being kicked off of their team because they're geezers, right? They're going to come here to the Steelers because, hey, put one of those guys in charge, we might be able to slop our way to 9 or 10 wins again. And that's really all that matters. I mean, really? Got to do better than that. You got to do. I have no interest in any of those guys. I just don't. I've heard all the names too. Rodgers, people are still talking about Darnold, Stafford. There's some talk that Dak Prescott might get moved. I mean, I don't know. I just know the Steelers need to have a real heart-to-heart with themselves and understand that they have to really change some of their philosophies, and they have to really start to build, right? Even if building means taking a little bit of a step back. And here's the thing I say to people when they say, well, if you take a step back, then, what are you going to do? Well, I'll say this. 4 years ago, if I told you 4 years ago the Steelers were going to be, 4-11-1, but they'd win a Super Bowl this year, would you trade your, non-winning season or non-losing season stuff? Of course you would. That's not to say you have to do that, but my point is you've got to take a step back. And quite frankly, the Penguins are in the same place. The best news for the Penguins is it sounds like GM Omar Khan is going to go back to Russia, and that's good. Because now you can start to really play young guys, get younger, and stop trying to kid yourself into thinking you're going to make the playoffs every year because you've got some old stars. Ain't good enough anymore, period. You're not good enough anymore. You haven't been good enough for quite some time, and it's the same thing with the Steelers. The Steelers are in the same exact boat. They're way too content to try and go 9-8 or 10-7. And if they go out and get one of these geezers that play quarterback, guess what? They're just telling you basically they're more interested in patching it together and slopping it together again than trying to build it up and get it better. That's what it is. It's time, for the Steelers to acknowledge that. But again, they've got the guy that has the blueprint. They've got him in their front office. Period. And Andy Weidel. So we'll see. Apparently tomorrow we've got pitchers and catchers reporting. That's good. Tomorrow we also got Pitt playing against SMU for perhaps their tournament lives. All kinds of good stuff coming up this week. This should be a big week. I know the NFL is done, but of course with the NFL it's never really done. So we'll start looking ahead to the offseason now, really looking at the offseason and what might happen. But I think that, again, if your message from the Super Bowl is you can run the ball and everything else and win, you can't win that way anyway. You can't win that way unless you have a roster like the Eagles and you're willing to be aggressive. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We will do it again tomorrow at the same time. And, of course, I'm down here at Archie's, and we do it every Monday. If you want to join us some Monday at Archie's, we'll do it again. Enjoy your night. Goodbye.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.